how does it work with Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup quarterback in San Francisco, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously the 49ers have been very adamant since, the end of last year that Trey is the guy. I think they have to continue to make sure they stress that to their guys when they have an opportunity that, hey, this is for the best of the team, but Trey is still our guy, because I think we all know, Jimmy has had success. Jimmy has done some really good things in that locker room. And so anytime you have a young quarterback that's probably going to go through some growing pains, it is very easy to look over your shoulder, especially what I look at with this team. They're a really good football team. Like, this isn't just a team that's rebuilding and is a couple years away. This is a team that I believe everybody thinks can compete for a championship if they get good quarterback play. And so that's the other piece to the puzzle. I mean, I remember when I was in New York and started, and they went to Eli, and Eli was the guy. And even though I remember, guys coming up to me all the time, like, why aren't you playing? We had a chance to get to the and so that's the kind of stuff that you really, really have to fight against. And it's not going to be anything that Jimmy does. Jimmy's going to be a great teammate, and I believe he's going to help Trey Lance as much as he can. But it's just natural. If things go against them early and they feel like they're a better team than where they're playing, or the young guy isn't playing up to what they need him to play at to be competitive, that's going to be a tough thing to fight. And no team wants that, where the locker room is divided and there's murmurs about who should be playing, and not even a knock on Trey Lance that he won't be the guy long term. It's just simply the idea that who's the best player for us right now? Who can help us win right now? And I think that's going to be the temptation and the hard thing, and why it's going to be so important for the organization, every opportunity they have, to go, we know Jimmy's here, and we understand he's but he's not our guy. Trey is our guy, and we're committed to Trey. And it's going to be important for the organization when there are struggles from Trey to be confident in going, hey, we're going right back to him. Another example, when I was in New York, we played against the Ravens. Eli really struggled. They put me in. We did really well, almost came back in that football game. And I remember going to Coach Coughlin saying, Coach, you have to go tell the media right now that Eli's our guy. We're going back to Eli. Even though they put me in and they knew, they wanted to put me in to help us win a particular game, that they were still committed to Eli. And those are the kind of things that this organization, I believe, is going to have to do, because they have a quarterback that took them to a Super Bowl, that was on the cusp of another Super Bowl, and guys in the locker room know him really, really well, that's going to be a temptation if out of the blocks Trey Lance doesn't play extremely well or has some really big bumps in the road.
Well, I mean, again, Kurt, if you're John Lynch, the general manager, and you're Jed York, the owner, and you're Kyle Shanahan, the coach, and you look at your roster going into the season, and you've got Nate Sudfeld backing up Trey Lance, or you can have Jimmy Garoppolo backing up Trey Lance, you're like, Jimmy Garoppolo. And there's certainly if the choice is, well, it's Nate Sudfeld backing up Trey Lance, or Jimmy gets cut and he winds up on the Seahawks. I mean, okay. Yeah. No, absolutely we're keeping Jimmy Garoppolo, but this is not just anybody. As you pointed out, it's a veteran who has a lot of people in the locker room who adore him for many obvious reasons. Can you give me an example again of how somebody in the locker room of the New York Giants, when Eli was there and you were there, that came up to you and said, why aren't you starting? Can you put a little bit more meat on those bones? Because that's the real stuff that could be happening in San Francisco in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so when I started the season, we started 5-2. We lost a couple games, and that's when they made the move to Eli. But even when they went to Eli, at that moment in the season, we were actually a playoff team. Even though we were only 5-4, we were a playoff team at that moment. And that's what these veteran players see, is they understand every year is important, that these opportunities don't come around very often when you're on a championship caliber team, and especially some of these guys not knowing if they're going to be on that team beyond the year. So they want to take advantage of every moment, and if they have a chance to get into the playoffs, because how many times have we seen that I'm an example with the Cardinals of teams that kind of sneak into the playoffs, aren't great teams going into the playoffs, and then they go on a run and they win a championship. And so guys understand that can happen. And so they just want those opportunities and they want to play well. And so that's what we were dealing with in New York. And I had to be the one that, kind of told these guys, hey, I hear you, but this is about the future, and this is about building towards what they would ultimately build towards in winning 2 championships with Eli Manning. But I had to be the one that was kind of the buffer for the coaches at times, even though I wanted to be playing, and even though I felt I was the better player at the time. And so it can be a very awkward situation. It could be very awkward for Jimmy as he's got buddies that come up to him and say that. What do you do? How do you handle that as a backup quarterback? And then, as I said, you never want guys walking into the huddle and kind of second-guessing the situation, with their young quarterback because they've got somebody on the sideline that they think is a better quarterback at this point in time. And so it's a tough situation. It is the reality of it, and you mentioned it. I mean, I would rather have Jimmy on my roster for insurance. I would rather have Jimmy if Trey struggles for a half and we want to put Jimmy in and we believe he can win a close game for us. I'd rather have him there as well. But there is a dynamic there that is going to be very interesting, especially, again, you got to remember, I was only there for 1 year. Jimmy's been there for a couple of years and knows these guys and is close to these guys. So that's a whole nother dynamic, just the relationship they have off the field that is going to be, a natural thing to come up. So it will be interesting and fascinating to watch how this plays out, how the 49ers deal with this. But those things are natural part of human nature, and especially, like I said, because I went to training camp and watched this team. This team is a really good team. I mean, we know what they were last year, but they're a really good team if they get good quarterback play. And that could be a point of frustration for the team at some point this year. And again, we're saying, not that Trey Lance has to go out and struggle. I mean, this young kid, go ball out and and have a year. But I just think we're trying to make that argument that if he does have some struggles, that's going to be part of human nature and the dynamic that they're going to have to muscle through.
My Hall of Fame friend, NFL Game Day morning compadre, and also voice, along with Kevin Harlan, of Monday Night Football on Westwood One, Kurt Warner, here on the Rich Eisen Show. So again, as we've established, if you can have Jimmy Garoppolo as your backup and he takes the pay cut to make it happen, check that box. And you also keep him from maybe winding up on Seattle or another team that can stand in your way when you get a chance to win the Super Bowl, check that box. But there's no question that this is a bet hedge in case Lance falters, right? Whether you point out like it's a second half of a game or something. So
I would argue, Rich, that I think they did it. That's a great fallback, is that he's your backup. I would argue just simply that the fact that there wasn't a market for Jimmy and Jimmy wasn't healthy, that I would not be surprised if they trade him fairly early in the season if something were to transpire, whether it be Seattle or anywhere, where there actually becomes a trade market, because that's a way, again, to... Well,
he's got a no-trade clause, Kurt, so he'd have to say yes to that, too, and so...
But Jimmy's... I just don't believe Jimmy, especially, if he's signing a one-year deal, would rather sit on the bench in San Francisco than play anywhere. So if he's getting traded, he's probably getting traded to play, and I would argue, I want to go play. I want to show people I'm healthy. I want to show people what I'm capable of doing, and I want to earn the next spot. So I think Jimmy would be happy to get traded anywhere, that wants him at that point.
Sure.
But I think that's kind of, we're surprised that there's absolutely no market for Jimmy Garoppolo, as good as he's been. Let's re-sign him, and we have that, insurance policy. But I think the bottom line is if something happens on one of these teams, they're going to look to move him really quick, and that will help to squash some of those things that we've been talking about.